The deafening crack of a gunshot echoed through the valley as Clara Lawson's chestnut mare reared in terror, throwing her violently to the unforgiving Montana earth. The year was 1875, and the untamed wilderness surrounding Bozeman held no mercy for a woman alone, especially one with a twisted leg splayed at an unnatural angle beneath her riding skirt. Clara bit her lip until she tasted blood, refusing to cry out despite the searing pain. 23 years of life had taught her to hide weakness, but as she tried to move, the agony nearly stole her consciousness. Dust swirled around her fallen form, kicked up by her horse's retreating hooves as the animal bolted toward the horizon. "Don't move," came a deep voice from somewhere above her. "You'll make it worse." Clara squinted against the late afternoon sun, making out the silhouette of a man on horseback. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jangling as he approached and knelt beside her. His face came into focus, strong-jawed, weather-beaten, with eyes the color of summer sky beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "I'll carry you home," he said, his voice gentler than his rugged appearance suggested. "I don't know you," Clara protested weakly, though in truth she'd glimpsed him in town, the mysterious rancher who kept to himself, the subject of whispered speculation among the ladies at church socials. "Name's Adam Quinn," he replied, carefully assessing her injury without touching it. "And you're Clara Lawson, the schoolteacher. Your father's place is a good 5 miles from here." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming. I'll take you to my cabin, it's closer. Send word to your pa once you're settled." Before Clara could object, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Pain shot through her leg, and she couldn't suppress a gasp. "Hold tight," Adam murmured, his breath warm against her hair as he carried her to his horse. "I've got you." Clara had never been so close to a man who wasn't family. She could smell leather, pine, and something indefinably masculine as he mounted his horse with her cradled against his chest. She should have been scandalized, but all she felt was safer than she had any right to feel with a virtual stranger. "What spooked your mare?" Adam asked as they rode, his deep voice rumbling against her cheek. "Gunshot," Clara managed through gritted teeth. "Hunters, maybe." Adam's body tensed. "No hunting season now. Might be rustlers. Or worse." The implications hung in the air between them as they made their way through stands of ponderosa pine. The land around Bozeman had grown more dangerous in recent years, with disputes between cattlemen, homesteaders, and those who lived outside the law. Clara's father had warned her about riding alone, but she'd been stubborn, insisting she could take care of herself. Now she was paying the price for that pride. Adam's cabin appeared as they crested a small rise, a sturdy structure of rough-hewn logs, with smoke curling from the stone chimney. A barn stood nearby, and a corral held several horses that lifted their heads at their approach. "My foreman must be back," Adam said, nodding toward another horse hitched outside. "Good. He can fetch the doctor." Clara felt a wave of embarrassment. "I'm sorry to be such trouble." Adam's arms tightened slightly around her. "No trouble, Miss Lawson." The cabin door opened as they approached, and a grizzled man with a salt and pepper beard stepped out, his expression shifting from welcome to concern. "Jasper," Adam called, "the lady's hurt. Fetch Doc Miller from town." Jasper nodded once, not wasting time with questions as he hurried to his horse. Inside, the cabin was unexpectedly clean and orderly. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over simple but well-made furniture. Adam carried Clara to a bed in the corner, laying her down with surprising gentleness. "I'll need to look at that leg," he said, his eyes meeting hers with silent question. Clara nodded, mortification coloring her cheeks. "I think it might be broken." "I'll be careful." Adam's calloused fingers worked with unexpected delicacy as he removed her boot and rolled up her riding skirt just enough to reveal her injured ankle. Clara fought to keep her breathing steady, both from pain and the impropriety of the situation. "Doesn't look broken," he said after a careful examination. "But it's a bad sprain. We'll need to wrap it and keep it elevated until the doc gets here." He met her eyes. "I'm going to have to cut away your stocking." Clara nodded, unable to speak. She watched as Adam retrieved a knife from his belt, the blade glinting in the firelight as he carefully sliced through the fabric, his touch clinical and respectful. Still, No man had ever seen this much of her leg before, and the knowledge sent heat flooding through her that had nothing to do with her injury. "I'll make some willow bark tea for the pain," Adam said, rising and moving to the kitchen area. "My mother was part Cherokee, taught me a few things about healing before she passed." Clara watched him work, grateful for the distraction from her discomfort. "You've lived out here long?" she asked. 5 years, Adam replied, setting water to boil. "Came west after the war. Wanted space to breathe." That explained the haunted shadow she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes, the same look her older brother had brought home from the battlefields. "You fought for the Union?" she ventured. Adam nodded, his back to her as he prepared the tea. "Illinois 45th. Your brother fought too, didn't he?" Clara was surprised. "Yes. How did you know?" "Small town," he said simply, bringing her the steaming mug. "People talk." Clara accepted the tea, their fingers brushing momentarily. "What do they say about me?" she asked impulsively. A ghost of a smile touched Adam's lips. "That you're the best teacher Bozeman's ever had. That you turned down 3 proposals last year. That you're as stubborn as you are beautiful." The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, left Clara speechless. She sipped the bitter tea to hide her confusion. Outside, the threatened storm broke with a crash of thunder. Rain lashed against the windows as Adam built up the fire, then moved to the door. "I'll check on the horses, make sure yours didn't come back this way," he said. "Shout if you need anything." Alone in the cabin, Clara took stock of her surroundings. Books lined a shelf beside the fireplace, surprising in number and variety for a rancher's home. A fiddle rested in a case nearby. On the mantel stood a single photograph in a simple frame, a dark-haired woman with Adam's eyes, standing beside a Cherokee man with proud bearing. The door opened, bringing in the smell of rain and earth as Adam returned, water dripping from his hat and coat. "Your mare's not among my stock," he reported, hanging his wet things by the door. "But Jasper will keep an eye out on his way to town." "Thank you," Clara said, realizing the words were wholly inadequate for what this stranger was doing for her. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Adam moved to check on her leg, which he'd propped up on a pillow. "Fever's the main concern with injuries like this. If infection sets in." He didn't finish the thought. Clara had seen enough frontier accidents to know what went unsaid. A simple injury could turn deadly without proper care. "The school board won't be pleased if I miss classes," she said, trying to make light of the situation. "They'll be less pleased if they lose their teacher entirely," Adam replied, his tone serious. "You'll stay here until the doctor says you can be moved safely." The propriety of such an arrangement should have concerned Clara more than it did. Instead, she found herself wondering about the solitary man who'd come to her rescue. "Won't your wife object to having a strange woman in her home?" she asked, though she'd never heard mention of Adam Quinn having a spouse. A shadow passed over his features. "No, wife," he said shortly, moving to the stove. "Are you hungry? I can make something simple." Clara recognized the change of subject, but didn't press. "A little," she admitted. The pain was subsiding somewhat, thanks to the willow bark tea, but exhaustion was taking its place. Adam worked efficiently, preparing a pan of cornbread and setting a pot of stew to heat. The domestic scene struck Clara as oddly intimate, this taciturn rancher cooking for her in his quiet cabin while rain drummed on the roof. "How long have you been teaching in Bozeman?" Adam asked, breaking the silence. 2 years, Clara replied. "I came from Pennsylvania after Father decided to try his hand at ranching. He wasn't having much luck back east after Mother died." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Montana's hard country, but it rewards those who respect it." He stirred the stew, then added, "Your father's built up a decent spread. Seems to be doing right by the land." Clara smiled faintly. "He works himself too hard. Doesn't trust that I can take care of myself." Her smile faded as she glanced at her injured leg. "I suppose today proves him right. Accidents happen to the most capable," Adam said. "Even old hands like me get thrown sometimes." His words were kind, but Clara couldn't help feeling foolish. She'd insisted on riding alone, against her father's wishes, determined to prove her independence. Now she was at the mercy of a stranger's kindness. They ate in companionable silence, the stew surprisingly flavorful. As Adam cleared away their bowls, hoofbeats approached through the rain, followed by a knock at the door. Dr. Miller bustled in, water streaming from his oilskin coat. "Miss Lawson," he exclaimed, removing his hat. Jasper told me what happened. Let's have a look at that leg. The examination was brief, but thorough. Not broken, thank the Lord, the doctor pronounced. But a nasty sprain. You'll need to stay off it for at least a week, maybe 2. He glanced at Adam. She shouldn't be moved tonight, not in this weather. She's welcome here, Adam said firmly. The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. I'll stop by the Lawson place on my way back to town. Let her father know she's safe. He packed his bag and turned to Clara. Rest, elevation, and cold compresses. I'll leave some laudanum for the pain. After the doctor left, an awkward silence fell between them. The impropriety of their situation couldn't be ignored any longer. Clara, raised with strict notions of propriety, knew her reputation could suffer if word spread about her spending the night in a bachelor's home, regardless of the circumstances. Adam seemed to read her thoughts. I'll sleep in the barn, he said, moving to gather a blanket. You can't, Clara protested. It's your home, and you've already done so much. I've slept in worse places, he replied, his tone brooking no argument. It's not far to check on you if needed. Before leaving, he made sure she had everything within reach: water, the laudanum, an extra blanket. His consideration touched Clara deeply. Adam, she said as he reached the door. Thank you. He paused, the firelight casting half his face in shadow. Get some rest, Miss Lawson. Alone in the cabin, Clara tried to settle comfortably despite her throbbing ankle. The unfamiliar surroundings kept her awake despite her exhaustion: the creaking of the cabin timbers, the persistent drumming of rain, the occasional distant cry of an animal in the night. She thought of Adam out in the barn, giving up his comfort for hers. What kind of man did that for a woman he barely knew? In her 23 years, Clara had met many men: earnest farmers, ambitious townsmen, even a few wealthy Easterners passing through, but none had intrigued her like Adam Quinn, with his quiet competence and unreadable blue eyes. Sleep finally claimed her, and she dreamed of riding across open meadows, a tall figure always just ahead, unreachable despite her efforts to catch up. Morning arrived with watery sunlight filtering through the windows. Clara woke disoriented, then remembered where she was and why. She struggled to sit up, wincing as her ankle protested the movement. The cabin door opened, and Adam entered carrying fresh water and what looked like clean clothing. He'd clearly been up for hours, his face freshly shaven, hair damp. How's the pain? He asked, setting down his burdens. Manageable, Clara replied, though in truth it had worsened overnight. Adam's expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he didn't argue. I brought one of my shirts and some trousers, he said, looking slightly uncomfortable. Thought you might want to change out of yesterday's clothes. They're clean, though they'll be too big. The consideration brought a lump to Clara's throat. Thank you. That's very thoughtful. Jasper's gone to your father's place to fetch proper things for you. Doc Miller told him last night, but I figured your father would want to know you're all right directly from someone who's seen you. Adam moved to check the fire. He'll likely come himself once the creek goes down. It was running high last night with the storm. Clara felt a pang of worry. The bridge, it's still standing, Adam assured her. But the approach on the south side is underwater. Should be passable by afternoon. He turned to face her. Are you hungry? I've got eggs from the coop. They breakfasted together, Adam helping Clara to a chair at the small table. The domesticity of the scene struck her again: how easily they fell into a rhythm together, as if they'd shared many such mornings. What will you do today? She asked as they finished eating. I don't want to keep you from your work. Nothing that can't wait, Adam replied, though Clara suspected otherwise. Spring was a busy time on any ranch, with calving and preparations for summer grazing. Please, she insisted, don't neglect your responsibilities on my account. I'll be fine here for a few hours. Adam studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I won't go far. There's a bookshelf if you get bored, and I'll leave my revolver within reach, just in case. The weapon gleamed dully on the table between them, a reminder that the wilderness held dangers beyond fallen horses. Clara had grown up shooting necessity rather than choice in frontier life, but the gesture reminded her that she was vulnerable here in ways beyond her injury. The gunshot yesterday, she said suddenly. You mentioned it might have been rustlers? Adam's expression tightened. There's been trouble lately. Cattle missing from several spreads, including your father's. Clara's eyes widened. He didn't tell me. Men like your father try to protect their womenfolk from worry, Adam said, though his tone suggested he might not agree with the practice. But you should know to be careful. Whoever's behind it doesn't care much for witnesses. A chill ran through Clara at the implication. You think they shot at me deliberately? No, Adam said quickly. More likely they were hunting where they shouldn't have been and spooked your horse by accident. But until we know for sure. He left the thought unfinished. After Adam left to tend to his ranch duties, Clara found herself restless despite her injury. She'd never been good at sitting idle. Using a chair as support, she managed to hobble around the cabin, learning more about its owner through his possessions than their conversations had revealed. The books on his shelf spoke of a curious mind histories, scientific texts, even poetry. Wordsworth and Whitman sat alongside practical manuals on animal husbandry and botany. A journal filled with neat handwriting documented years of weather patterns, crop yields, and cattle lineages. In a drawer, searching for paper to leave a note of thanks, she found sketches landscapes, animals, and occasionally people, rendered with surprising skill. Adam Quinn, it seemed, was a man of hidden depths. Midday brought Adam back to the cabin, his shirt damp with sweat from his morning's work. He paused in the doorway, taking in Clara's position by the bookshelf. You shouldn't be up, he said, though his tone held more concern than censure. I was careful, Clara assured him. Your books are impressive. I didn't take you for such an avid reader. A hint of color touched Adam's tanned cheeks. Winter nights are long out here, he said, moving to help her back to the bed. Reading passes the time. His hand was warm against her waist as he supported her weight, and Clara found herself acutely aware of his nearness. He smelled of sunshine and grass and honest work, so different from the cologne-scented gentleman who'd sought her attention in town. Your drawings are quite good, too, she said as he helped her sit. Adam stilled. You found those. I'm sorry, Clara said quickly. I was looking for paper to write a note. I shouldn't have pried. No harm done, he replied after a moment, though something in his expression had closed off. Most are just practice. Something to do with idle hands. Before Clara could respond, hoofbeats approached outside. Adam moved to the window, tension visible in his shoulders until he recognized the riders. Your father, he said, turning back to her. And Jasper with him. Clara felt a mixture of relief and unexpected disappointment. Of course, she wanted to see her father, to reassure him she was well, but a part of her wasn't ready to leave this cabin and its enigmatic owner just yet. Henry Lawson burst through the door moments later, his weathered face creased with worry. Clara, he exclaimed, rushing to her side. When your mare came back without you, he broke off, emotion choking his words as he took her hands in his. I'm all right, father, Clara assured him. Mr. Quinn found me before any real harm was done. Henry turned to Adam, extending a hand. I don't know how to thank you, Quinn. Adam clasped the offered hand briefly. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. Not everyone, Henry replied meaningfully. Most might have just brought her straight to town, not cared for her themselves. He glanced around the cabin. You've been comfortable, Clara? Very, she affirmed. Mr. Quinn has been the perfect gentleman. Something unspoken passed between the two men, an acknowledgement of boundaries respected, perhaps, or simply male understanding that Clara couldn't interpret. Creek's going down, Henry said. We can get you home before dark if we leave soon. Brought the wagon with a pallet for your comfort. Clara nodded, trying to hide her reluctance. Of course. While her father went to prepare the wagon, Adam helped Clara gather her few belongings. Their hands brushed as he passed her the borrowed clothing, now neatly folded. Keep them, he said. Might need something comfortable while you're healing. Clara clutched the bundle to her chest. I don't know how to repay your kindness. Adam's eyes met hers, something unguarded in them for the first time. Seeing you recover will be payment enough. His voice was low, meant for her alone. You gave me quite a scare yesterday, Miss Lawson. The admission sent a flutter through Clara's chest. Clara, she corrected softly. After all this, I think you've earned the right to use my given name. A small smile curved Adam's mouth. Clara, he repeated, as if testing the feel of it. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then Henry called from outside, and the connection broke. Adam carried Clara to the wagon as easily as he had from her fallen horse, settling her carefully on the pallet her father had arranged. Their farewell was brief, a simple exchange of thanks and good wishes, nothing to suggest the strange intimacy that had grown between them in less than a day. As the wagon pulled away, Clara looked back to see Adam standing before his cabin, one hand raised in farewell. The image stayed with her long after they'd left his property behind. "Quinn's a good man," her father said after they'd traveled in silence for some time. "Keeps to himself mostly. Not many know much about him." Clara sensed a question in her father's observation. "He was very kind," she replied carefully. "But as you said, private." Henry nodded, seeming satisfied with her response. "Doc says you'll need to stay off that ankle for at least a week. I've asked Mrs. Peterson to come help at the house." Clara bit back her protest. Mrs. Peterson was a kindly widow from church, but her constant chatter would be trying when Clara was confined to the house. Still, she recognized the necessity their ranch required constant attention, and her father couldn't be expected to tend to both it and an invalid daughter. "Thank you," she said instead. "That's very thoughtful." Henry glanced at her, a knowing look in his eyes. "You're disappointed to leave Quinn's place." The observation startled Clara. Her father had never been particularly perceptive about her feelings before. I'm grateful for his help," she said carefully. Was Henry's only response, but the small smile playing at his lips told Clara he understood more than she'd admitted. The Lawson ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a modest but well-maintained homestead with a 2-story house, barn, and outbuildings. It had been Clara's home for only 2 years, but she'd grown fond of it, despite the isolation and challenges of frontier life. Mrs. Peterson was waiting on the porch, her round face creased with concern as Henry carried Clara inside. The next hours passed in a flurry of fussing, changing into a proper nightgown, having her ankle rewrapped, being settled in her bedroom with pillows and blankets arranged just so. By the time evening fell, Clara was exhausted from the journey and attention. Alone at last in her familiar room, she found herself thinking of Adam's cabin, the simplicity and peace of it, so different from this house, with its reminders of her Eastern upbringing. She drifted to sleep with the memory of strong arms carrying her to safety, wondering if she would see those piercing blue eyes again before her confinement ended. The next week passed slowly. Clara chafed at her restricted movement, having never been one for idleness. She corrected school papers Mrs. Peterson brought from town, read every book in the house, and even attempted some mending, though her heart wasn't in it. Her father brought news each evening, weather reports, cattle counts, town gossip. He never mentioned Adam Quinn directly, but Clara caught him watching her whenever the neighboring ranches came up in conversation. On the 6th day of her confinement, as Clara sat on the porch taking advantage of the spring sunshine, a rider approached down the long drive to their home. She recognized the set of his shoulders before she could make out his face. Adam, his hat pulled low against the midday glare. Her heart quickened as he dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post. He carried something wrapped in brown paper under one arm. "Miss Lawson," he greeted her, removing his hat as he approached the porch. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Clara replied, too quickly. She smoothed her skirts, suddenly conscious of her appearance after days of illness. "Father's out with the herd, but Mrs. Peterson is inside if propriety concerns you." A smile touched Adam's lips. "Always proper," he said, climbing the porch steps. "How's the ankle?" "Much improved," Clara said. "Dr. Miller says I can return to teaching next week, though I'm to avoid riding for a while longer." Adam nodded, seeming pleased by the news. "I brought you something," he said, extending the paper-wrapped package. "Thought you might be getting restless." Clara accepted the gift, curious. Unwrapping it revealed several books, new ones she hadn't seen before, their spines barely cracked. "Emerson," she noted, running her fingers over the embossed title. "And Thoreau. These are wonderful. Seemed like they might appeal to a woman who rides alone across the countryside," Adam said, his eyes warm. "Independent spirits, both of them." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Clara deeply. "Thank you," she said, meeting his gaze. "Not just for these, but for everything. I never properly expressed my gratitude." "No need," Adam said, shifting slightly as if uncomfortable with her thanks. "Your father mentioned you'd be returning to town soon for the school term." Clara nodded. "I stay at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house during the week. It's easier than traveling back and forth each day." "Safe arrangement," Adam agreed. Then, more hesitantly, perhaps I might call on you there sometime, or escort you to Sunday services when you're home for the weekend. The request, so formally delivered, brought warmth to Clara's cheeks. This was no casual inquiry, but a proper expression of interest that adhered to all social conventions. I would like that, she replied softly. Something in Adam's posture relaxed, as if he'd been bracing for rejection. Good, he said simply. That's good. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted them as Henry Lawson returned from his morning's work. He showed no surprise at finding Adam on his porch, merely nodding in greeting as he dismounted. Quinn, he acknowledged. Checking on my girl? Brought her some reading material, Adam replied. And to see about escorting her to services when she's back in town. Clara expected her father to show concern or at least surprise at this development. Instead, he merely smiled. Thoughtful of you. Stay for dinner. The invitation, so casually extended, suggested to Clara that perhaps her father had anticipated this turn of events. Had he noticed something between them that day at Adam's cabin? Or was this simply the frontier practicality that recognized a potential good match when it presented itself? Adam accepted the invitation, and the evening that followed was surprisingly comfortable. He and Henry discussed cattle breeds and grazing rights, the railroad's expansion, and what it might mean for local ranchers. Clara, still restricted in her movements, found herself watching Adam, the animation that came into his normally reserved expression when discussing topics that interested him. The respect he showed her father, the occasional glances he sent her way when he thought she wasn't looking. As darkness fell, Adam took his leave, promising to see Clara in town the following Sunday. At the door, away from her father's watchful eye, he took her hand briefly. I'm glad you're healing well, he said, his voice low. Good night, Clara. The touch of his calloused fingers against hers lingered long after he'd ridden away. True to his word, Adam appeared at Sunday services the week Clara returned to town. The curious glances and whispered speculations of Bozeman's residents were not lost on her as Adam tipped his hat to her outside the white clapboard church. Miss Lawson. He greeted her formally, though his eyes held warmth that belied the stiffness of his words. May I escort you inside? Clara accepted his arm, acutely aware of the eyes following them up the church steps. Adam Quinn rarely attended services, and never as escort to a young woman. The town would be buzzing with gossip before the sermon ended. Mrs. Hollister, Clara's landlady and self-appointed guardian while she was in town, watched with narrowed eyes as they took a seat together in the pew. Clara met her gaze steadily, a silent message that her choice of companion was not open for discussion. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Adam called at the boarding house on Wednesday evenings and escorted Clara to church on Sundays. Their conversations deepened as they grew more comfortable with each other. Clara learned of Adam's childhood in Illinois, his Cherokee mother's struggle for acceptance, his father's unwavering devotion to her despite community prejudice. Adam, in turn, discovered Clara's passion for education, her dreams of establishing a proper school building in Bozeman to replace the converted storefront where she currently taught, her quiet determination to make a difference in her students' lives. They rode together when Clara's ankle healed fully, exploring the valleys and ridges surrounding Bozeman. Adam showed her hidden meadows carpeted with wildflowers, crystal streams teeming with trout, ancient petroglyphs left by peoples long gone from the land. On a golden afternoon in late May, they paused their horses atop a ridge overlooking a valley lush with spring growth. The distant mountains still wore caps of snow, but the world around them hummed with new life. I never showed anyone this place before, Adam said, dismounting and helping Clara down from her mare, the same horse that had thrown her, now calm under her experienced handling. Clara surveyed the panoramic view. It's breathtaking, she said honestly. Thank you for sharing it with me. Adam took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the weeks of courtship. I wanted to ask you something, he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of tension Clara hadn't heard before. Her heart quickened. Yes. There's a social at the Mason's barn next Saturday, he said. Would you do me the honor of attending as my partner? The request seemed oddly formal after their weeks of companionship, but Clara understood its significance. The Masons' spring social was the most important gathering of the season in Bozeman. Attending together would be a public declaration of their relationship. I would be delighted, she replied, squeezing his hand. Relief and something else, anticipation, perhaps, flickered across Adam's features. Good, he said. Then, in a move that surprised her, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Very good. The warmth of his mouth against her skin sent a tremor through Clara that had nothing to do with the spring breeze. They had maintained strict propriety throughout their courtship, but in this isolated spot, with only the sky as witness, the boundaries between them seemed suddenly fragile. Adam must have felt it too, for he released her hand and stepped back slightly. We should head back, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Storm clouds building to the west. Clara nodded, though the sky above them remained clear. The real storm, she suspected, was brewing between them, a tension that grew with each meeting, each conversation that revealed another layer of compatibility, each glance that lingered longer than propriety allowed. The Masons' social arrived with perfect spring weather and what seemed like the entire population of Bozeman County in attendance. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the enormous barn, casting golden light over hay bales arranged for seating and tables laden with food. A small band played lively tunes in one corner, and couples already spun across the cleared floor in the center. Clara wore her best dress for the occasion, blue calico with white trim, simply cut, but flattering to her slim figure and auburn hair. She'd taken special care with her appearance, pinning her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. Adam's expression when he arrived to escort her from the boarding house told her the effort had been worthwhile. He stood speechless for a moment on Mrs. Hollister's porch, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. "You look beautiful," he said finally, offering his arm. Clara flushed with pleasure. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." It was true Adam had exchanged his usual working clothes for a clean white shirt, dark vest, and new-looking trousers. He'd even trimmed his beard and slicked back his dark hair. Their arrival at the barn caused the expected stir. Clara caught the speculative glances of the townswomen, the appraising looks from the men. Adam's hand at the small of her back was warm and reassuring as they navigated the crowd. "Miss Lawson," called Abigail Mason, the hostess's teenage daughter and one of Clara's students. "You came with Mr. Quinn." The girl's lack of subtlety made Clara smile despite her embarrassment. "Yes, Abigail. Mr. Quinn was kind enough to escort me." "Are you going to dance?" the girl asked eagerly. "Everyone's talking about it." Clara felt Adam stiffen slightly beside her. "We haven't decided yet," she answered diplomatically, guiding the conversation to safer ground by complimenting the decorations. Later, as they sampled the potluck offerings, Clara asked quietly, "Do you dance, Adam?" He set down his plate, looking uncomfortable. "Not well," he admitted. "Never had much occasion to learn properly." Clara understood the unspoken concern that he might embarrass her with his lack of skill in front of the entire community. "We don't have to," she assured him. "I'm perfectly content to sit and talk." Adam studied her for a moment, then stood and extended his hand. "No," he said decisively. "I'd like to dance with you, if you'll be patient with my clumsiness." The simple courage of the gesture, this proud, capable man willing to risk looking foolish for her sake, touched Clara deeply. She placed her hand in his. "I'd be honored." They joined the couples forming for a Virginia reel. Adam watched the steps carefully, following Clara's whispered guidance. He moved with the natural grace of a horseman, quickly grasping the pattern of the dance. By the third tune, he was leading her with growing confidence, his smile unreserved as they turned together. "You're a natural," Clara told him during a pause between songs. Adam's hand remained at her waist, propriety temporarily forgotten in the excitement of the dance. "I have an excellent teacher," he replied, his eyes holding hers. The band struck up a waltz, a more intimate dance that some of the more conservative townspeople still viewed with suspicion. Several couples left the floor, but Adam tightened his hold slightly on Clara's hand. "May I?" he asked, his voice low. Clara nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Adam drew her closer, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers properly. They began to move in the prescribed three-quarter time, their bodies maintaining a respectable distance that nonetheless felt more intimate than anything Clara had experienced before. "People are watching," she murmured, feeling the weight of curious eyes. "Let them," Adam replied, his gaze never leaving her face. "I'm not ashamed to be seen dancing with the woman I'm courting." The directness of his words sent a thrill through Clara. This was the first time either of them had openly acknowledged the nature of their relationship. "Is that what you're doing? Courting me?" Adam's steps faltered slightly, then resumed with determination. "What else would you call it?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath his steady tone. "Unless I've misunderstood your feelings." "You haven't," Clara said quickly, squeezing his hand. We've never said it outright." "Then let me say it now," Adam replied, guiding her through a turn. "I'm courting you, Clara Lawson, with honorable intentions. If that meets with your approval." Clara's heart seemed to swell within her chest. "It does," she said simply, knowing her eyes conveyed what words could not. They completed the dance in charged silence, aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. As the music ended, Adam led her toward the barn doors, where couples were stepping outside to cool off in the evening air. Under the canopy of stars, away from the press of the crowd, Adam turned to face her. "I'm not good with words," he said, his voice low and serious. "But I want you to know that these past weeks have been the happiest I can remember." Clara felt the same certainty rising within her. "For me as well," she admitted. Adam took her hands in his expression earnest in the moonlight. "I never expected to find someone like you, Clara. Someone who understands the life I've chosen here, who shares my love for this land." "Nor I you," Clara replied honestly. "Most men want a wife who's content to stay home and mind children, not one who insists on teaching other people's." A smile curved Adam's mouth. "I wouldn't want you any other way than exactly as you are," he said. "Stubborn independence and all." The tenderness in his voice undid Clara's last reservations. When he moved closer, his intention clear in his eyes, she didn't pull away. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss, brief, questioning, and deeply respectful. "I've wanted to do that since the day I carried you home," Adam confessed as they parted, his forehead resting against hers. Clara's hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "I've wanted you to," she whispered back. Their second kiss was less hesitant, a proper declaration of feelings too long contained. Adam's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as Clara's hands slid up to his shoulders. The world narrowed to just this: the warmth of his embrace, the gentle pressure of his mouth on hers, the scent of pine and leather that she'd come to associate with safety and belonging. A throat clearing nearby broke them apart. Sheriff Miller stood a few paces away, his expression a mixture of amusement and official disapproval. "Evening, folks," he said pointedly. "Fine night for stargazing." Clara felt heat rush to her face, but Adam kept one arm securely around her waist. "Sheriff," he acknowledged calmly. "Just getting some air." "I can see that," the lawman replied dryly. "Miss Lawson, your landlady was looking for you. Something about proper hours for a schoolteacher." Clara winced. Mrs. Hollister's strict views on decorum were well known in Bozeman. "Thank you, Sheriff. We'll be right in." As the lawman moved off to continue his rounds, Adam gave her waist a gentle squeeze. "I should get you back before your reputation suffers," he said, though his reluctance was evident in his tone. Clara nodded, equally unwilling to end the moment but aware of the social constraints they still needed to respect. "Will I see you tomorrow?" she asked. Adam's expression softened. "Try to keep me away," he promised, pressing one last quick kiss to her forehead before leading her back inside. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur for Clara. She was conscious of Adam's constant presence at her side, the subtle touches they exchanged, the private glances that spoke volumes more than words could convey. By the time he escorted her back to the boarding house, the entire town would know that Adam Quinn and Clara Lawson were officially courting. Mrs. Hollister waited up for them, her tight-lipped expression suggesting she'd heard about their moment outside the barn. "Miss Lawson," she greeted them stiffly. "Mr. Quinn." "Madam," Adam replied respectfully. "Thank you for allowing me to escort Clara this evening. I'll call tomorrow afternoon, if that's convenient." The landlady's eyebrows rose at his use of Clara's first name, but she merely nodded. "Sunday is a day of rest, Mr. Quinn. After church would be appropriate." Adam accepted the restriction gracefully. "Of course. Good night, then." To Clara, he added softly, "Sleep well." "Good night." she replied, reluctant to release his hand but aware of Mrs. Hollister's watchful gaze. Once Adam had gone and the door was firmly shut, the older woman turned to Clara with hands on her hips. "Well," she said, her tone softening slightly. "It seems Mr. Quinn has serious intentions." Clara couldn't suppress her smile. "It seems so," she agreed. Mrs. Hollister shook her head, though her eyes held a glimmer of approval. "He's a good man, from what I hear. Keeps to himself, but fair in his dealings." "Your father approves?" "Yes," Clara confirmed. "They get along well." "Then I wish you happiness," the landlady said, surprising Clara with the warmth in her voice. "But no more unchaperoned stargazing, young lady. This is still a respectable house." Clara promised to maintain proper decorum, though as she prepared for bed, her thoughts were far from proper. The memory of Adam's kiss lingered, awakening feelings she'd never experienced with any of her previous suitors. For the first time in her life, Clara understood why women might risk reputation and security for love. The realization was both exhilarating and frightening. The next weeks brought a deepening of their relationship as summer bloomed across the Montana landscape. Adam called at the boarding house during Clara's time in town, escorted her to church and social functions, and spent time at the Lawson Ranch when she returned home on weekends. Their courtship proceeded with proper restraint in public, though their private moments always within the bounds of propriety, but increasingly affectionate revealed the growing strength of their feelings. On a warm evening in early July, as they sat on the porch of Clara's father's home watching fireflies rise from the meadow grass, Adam took her hand with unusual solemnity. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice carrying an undercurrent of tension. Clara turned to face him, struck by the intensity in his expression. "About us. The future." Adam's thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture that had become familiar but still sent shivers through her. "I want to ask your father for permission to marry you, if that's what you want to." Though Clara had anticipated this moment might come, the reality of it still took her breath away. "Yes," she said simply, squeezing his hand. "That's what I want too." Relief and joy transformed Adam's features. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I don't have much to offer compared to some men," he said honestly. "The ranch is small, the work is hard, and I'm not always easy company. But I promise to be a good husband to you, Clara, to respect your independence and support your teaching for as long as you want to continue." The sincerity of his words touched Clara deeply. "I don't want some man," she told him, reaching up to touch his face. "I want you, Adam Quinn, exactly as you are." Their kiss sealed the promise between them, tender and full of hope for the future they would build together. Henry Lawson gave his blessing readily when Adam approached him the next morning. "I've been expecting this conversation," he admitted, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. "You've made your intentions clear from the start. Clara's mother would have approved of you, and that's the highest compliment I can give." Plans for a September wedding began to take shape. Clara would finish the summer term at school, then take a brief leave for the ceremony and honeymoon before returning to teaching. Adam set his ranch hands to work expanding his cabin, adding a proper bedroom, and improving the kitchen to make it more suitable for family life. Their happiness seemed complete until the trouble that had been brewing in the county finally erupted into violence. It began with the disappearance of a herd of cattle from the Winston Ranch bordering Adam's property. Sheriff Miller assembled a posse to track the rustlers, and Adam, with his skill as a tracker, volunteered to help. "I don't like it," Clara confessed as they said goodbye the night before Adam was to join the posse. "These men have already killed once." A rancher from the North Valley had been found shot 2 weeks earlier, presumably for interrupting a theft in progress. Adam's expression was grim but determined, which is why they need to be stopped before anyone else gets hurt. "I'll be careful, I promise." Clara knew better than to ask him to stay behind. The safety of the community was at stake, and Adam's sense of duty wouldn't allow him to stand aside when his skills could help bring the criminals to justice. Instead, she pressed a small object into his hand, a locket containing a tiny photograph of her, taken in town the previous month. "To remind you what's waiting at home," she said softly. Adam closed his fingers around the gift, his eyes reflecting emotions too deep for words. "I'll come back to you," he vowed, drawing her close for a kiss that held the weight of promise. The posse departed at dawn, a line of determined men on horseback following Sheriff Miller east toward the territorial border. Clara watched from the edge of town until they disappeared over the horizon, trying to ignore the cold knot of fear in her stomach. 3 days passed with no word. Clara went through the motions of teaching, her mind constantly straying to thoughts of Adam facing danger in the wild country beyond Bozeman. Her students noticed her distraction but were kind enough not to comment. On the 4th day, as Clara was dismissing her class for the afternoon, a commotion in the street drew her attention. Horses were approaching at speed, the posse returning, but in disarray, some men supporting others who were clearly injured. Clara's heart seemed to stop as she scanned the riders for Adam's familiar figure. She didn't see him among those on horseback. Panic rising, she hurried into the street, heedless of propriety or the curious stares of her students. Sheriff Miller dismounted heavily, his face grim beneath a layer of trail dust. "Miss Lawson," he acknowledged, seeing her approach. "We found the rustlers." "Adam?" she asked, unable to form a more coherent question as fear constricted her throat. The sheriff's expression softened slightly. "He's alive," he assured her quickly. "Took a bullet in the shoulder when we cornered the gang. He's in the wagon with Doc Miller." Clara pushed past him toward the approaching wagon, relief and fresh worry warring within her. Adam lay on a makeshift pallet in the bed of the vehicle, his face pale beneath his tan, a blood-stained bandage visible beneath his torn shirt. "Clara," he said hoarsely as she climbed up beside him, his eyes lighting despite his obvious pain. "I told them not to worry you." "As if that were possible," she replied, taking his hand and pressing it to her cheek. "How bad is it?" "Clean through the shoulder," Dr. Miller answered, checking Adam's bandage. "Missed anything vital, but he's lost blood and the risk of infection is high. We need to get him settled so I can clean the wound properly." Clara made an instant decision. "Take him to my father's ranch," she instructed. "It's closer than his own place, and I can care for him there." No one argued with her, recognizing the determination in her voice. Within the hour, Adam was installed in the Lawsons' guest room, his wound properly cleaned and bandaged, with Clara keeping anxious vigil at his bedside. "This seems familiar," Adam murmured as she adjusted his pillows, his voice weak, but his eyes alert. "Though our positions are reversed." Clara managed a smile despite her worry. "You carried me home," she reminded him. "It seems only fair I should do the same for you." Adam's hand found hers. "I kept my promise," he said, his fingers tightening around the locket he still carried. "I came back to you." "Yes, you did," Clara replied, bending to kiss his forehead. "Now rest. You need to heal." The next days were anxious ones as Adam battled the inevitable fever that followed his injury. Clara barely left his side, sponging his brow when the fever burned hottest, coaxing broth between his cracked lips when he was lucid enough to swallow, whispering reassurances when nightmares made him call out in his sleep. Her father took over the management of Adam's ranch, sending Jasper daily reports on the cattle and crops so Clara could reassure Adam when he asked about his property. The school board arranged for a substitute teacher, understanding the circumstances without Clara having to explain. 5 days after the shooting, Adam's fever broke at last. Clara, dozing in the chair beside his bed after another night of vigilance, woke to find him watching her, his eyes clear for the first time since his return. "You look terrible," he said, his voice weak but tinged with humor. Clara laughed through sudden tears of relief. "Such flattery," she replied, reaching for his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by a herd," Adam admitted. "But alive. Thanks to you." She shook her head. "Dr. Miller did the medical work. I just stayed nearby." Adam's expression grew serious. "You did more than that," he said softly. "When the fever was worst, I could hear your voice. It gave me something to hold on to." The simple admission undid Clara's composure. She buried her face against his uninjured shoulder, finally allowing herself to release the fear she'd been containing for days. Adam's good arm came around her, holding her close despite his weakness. "I was so afraid," she confessed against his neck, "when I saw the posse return and couldn't find you among the riders." "I know," Adam murmured, his hand stroking her hair. "I'm sorry for scaring you." Clara raised her head, meeting his gaze directly. "Just don't do it again," she said firmly. "I'm not interested in being a widow before I'm even a wife." A smile touched Adam's pale lips. Yes, madam, he agreed. I'll do my best to avoid getting shot in the future. His recovery progressed steadily after that. Within 2 weeks, he was strong enough to sit on the porch for short periods, watching the ranch activities with growing impatience to rejoin them. Clara divided her time between caring for him and preparing for their approaching wedding, which they had decided not to postpone despite his injury. I've waited long enough to make you my wife, Adam told her when she suggested delaying until he was fully healed. Unless you're having second thoughts? Never, Clara assured him, taking his face between her hands. I just want our wedding day to be perfect for you. Adam turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. Having you beside me is all the perfection I need, he said simply. The rustlers who had wounded Adam faced territorial justice, tried and convicted based on evidence gathered during the posse's mission. The ringleader and the man who had shot the northern rancher received hanging sentences, while their accomplices were sentenced to long prison terms. Peace returned to Bozeman County as ranchers no longer feared for their herds or their lives. September arrived with perfect weather for a wedding. The ceremony was held at the Lawson Ranch, with flowers from Clara's mother's garden decorating the arch beneath which they exchanged their vows. Clara wore a simple white dress ordered from a catalog in Helena, while Adam stood tall and proud in a new suit, his arms still carried in a sling, but his face radiant with happiness. I, Adam, take thee, Clara, to be my wedded wife, he repeated after the minister, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Clara's voice trembled slightly as she made the same vows, emotion threatening to overwhelm her as she looked into the eyes of the man who had carried her home that fateful day and, in doing so, had carried himself into her heart. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. Adam's kiss was gentle but full of promise, his good arm drawing Clara close as their assembled friends and family applauded. When they turned to face the crowd as Mr. and Mrs. Quinn, Clara felt a sense of rightness settle over her, as if all the paths of her life had been leading to this moment. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing in the Lawsons' barn, decorated much like the Masons had been for the social where Adam and Clara had first danced together. Despite his healing shoulder, Adam insisted on leading his wife in their first dance as a married couple, his movements careful but graceful as they circled the floor together. Happy, he murmured against her ear as they swayed to the music. Clara looked up at him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. Completely, she replied. And you? More than I ever thought possible, Adam said, his eyes reflecting the depth of his feelings. You've given me a home in more than just a place, Clara. You've given me a home in your heart. The simple poetry of his words touched her deeply. As you have in yours, she whispered back. Later, as twilight deepened and stars appeared above the mountains, they departed for Adam's ranch, their ranch now in a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers by Clara's students. The cabin awaited them, transformed by Adam's careful work and Clara's feminine touches into a true home. Adam insisted on carrying Clara across the threshold despite his healing shoulder. Tradition, he said when she protested, lifting her easily into his arms. And I've been looking forward to this moment for a very long time. Inside, the fireplace cast golden light over the simple furnishings, the bookshelf now holding Clara's volumes alongside Adam's, the bed covered with a wedding quilt pieced by the women of Bozeman, the kitchen stocked and ready for their life together. Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn, Adam said softly, setting Clara on her feet, but keeping his arm around her waist. Clara turned within his embrace, reaching up to touch his face with wonder. My husband, she whispered, still marveling at the reality of it. Their kiss held all the promise of the future stretching before them, seasons of work and rest, joy and challenge, the family they hoped to create together, the love that had begun with an accident and a kindness on a spring afternoon. That night, in the privacy of their home, they learned each other in ways new and profound, their bodies expressing what words could only hint at. Clara discovered the strength and gentleness of her husband, while Adam marveled at the passion and tenderness of his wife. Their union was a beginning, not an ending, the first chapter in a story they would write together across the years to come. Dawn found them wrapped in each other's arms, watching the light change across the valley visible from their bedroom window. Adam's fingers traced lazy patterns on Clara's bare shoulder, his expression peaceful. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, resting her head against his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "That I'm the luckiest man in Montana," Adam replied honestly, "and that I can't wait to see what our life together brings." Clara smiled, pressing a kiss to his skin. "Whatever it brings, we'll face it together," she promised. Their life together unfolded across the seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. Clara continued teaching in Bozeman, riding back and forth to the ranch when weather permitted, staying at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house during the worst of winter. Adam's ranch prospered under their combined efforts, his practical knowledge of the land complemented by Clara's organizational skills and education. The following spring brought news that filled their home with new anticipation. Clara was expecting their first child, due to arrive as autumn painted the mountains gold and crimson. She continued teaching as long as possible, finally conceding to stay home in her 7th month when the journey to town became too taxing. "A boy, do you think?" Adam asked one evening as they sat on the porch, his hand resting on the swell of Clara's abdomen where their child grew. "Perhaps," Clara replied, covering his hand with her own as a strong kick pushed against his palm. "Though I'll be equally happy with a daughter." "As will I," Adam assured her, "so long as the child has your spirit and intelligence." Clara laughed. "And your patience and strength," she added. "Between us, this child should have every quality needed for a good life." Their son, Henry Adam Quinn, arrived on a crisp October morning in 1876, announcing himself with lusty cries that proclaimed his healthy lungs. Clara, exhausted but radiant, watched as Adam held their child for the first time, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "He's perfect," Adam whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Clara's arms. "Like his mother." "He has your eyes," Clara observed as the newborn gazed up at them. "And I think your chin as well." Adam leaned down to press a kiss to her forehead, his emotions too powerful for words. This woman who had fallen from her horse into his life had given him more than he had ever dreamed possible: love, partnership, and now a son to carry their shared legacy into the future. Young Henry thrived in the healthy mountain air, growing strong under the watchful eyes of his parents. Clara returned to teaching part-time when he was 6 months old, bringing him with her to school several days a week. The arrangement raised eyebrows among more traditional townspeople, but Clara's reputation as an excellent teacher silenced most criticism. As their family grew with the addition of a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, 2 years later, the Quinns expanded their home, adding rooms to accommodate their children and Clara's dream of a small library where her students could borrow books outside of school hours. The ranch prospered, allowing them to hire additional hands and improve their cattle stock with new breeding lines. Adam's natural artistic talents found expression in woodworking during the quiet winter months, creating furniture for their home and carvings that captured the beauty of the Montana wilderness. Clara's advocacy for education led to the construction of a proper schoolhouse in Bozeman, where she eventually became headmistress while continuing to teach the older students. Through it all, their love deepened and matured, weathering the inevitable storms of life: drought years that threatened the ranch, illness that confined Clara to bed for weeks during a harsh winter, the loss of Clara's father to heart failure 5 years into their marriage. Each challenge faced together strengthened the bond between them. Each joy shared doubled in sweetness. On the 10th anniversary of the day Adam had found Clara thrown from her horse, they returned to the spot where their story had begun. The land had changed little in the decade that had passed: the same rolling hills, the same distant mountains, the same wild beauty that had drawn them both to Montana. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Clara asked as they sat together on a blanket spread over the spring grass, watching their children picking wildflowers nearby. Adam smiled, taking her hand in his. "Don't move," he recalled. "I'll carry you home." Clara leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. "You've been carrying me home ever since," she said softly. "To the most beautiful home I could have imagined." Adam's arm slid around her waist, drawing her closer. "And you've been my home," he replied, his voice deepening with emotion. Everywhere and always. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, casting long shadows across the land they both loved, Adam and Clara Quinn gathered their children and mounted their horses to return to the ranch that had grown from a solitary cabin to a thriving homestead. Their story, begun with a fall and a rescue, had blossomed into a legacy of love that would endure through generations to come, a testament to the healing power of compassion and the enduring strength of hearts that find their perfect match on the wild frontier. The last rays of sunlight gilded the family as they rode homeward, together and complete, their path illuminated by the same golden light that had witnessed their beginning on a spring day long ago, when her horse had reared and thrown her hard, and a cowboy had said, "Don't move, I'll carry you home."